Welcome, guys. Crypto Clay here today with somebody that has been in the space around the same amount of time as I have. Kurt, I'll just go ahead and let you introduce yourself. And if you could just tell us what exactly brought you into the space and what you're involved in right now.
Sure. I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. from Crypto Traders Pro. You can find all of our stuff at cryptotraderspro.com. We're primarily a Facebook community in that regard, but I'm all over Twitter and a bunch of places too. I got into Bitcoin. It was 2012, and I owned a printing company in Chicago, and I was always a monetary activist. I had worked on 2 Ron Paul campaigns. So by 2012, I was involved in some of the Chicago related and the Fed rallies and that kind of thing. So I had a lot of friends in like the anarcho-capitalist voluntarist movements and stuff. And some buddy of mine was like, "Hey, you're a printer, right?" And it's like, "Yeah, well, whatever you need, you know." And I had done T-shirts and stuff for some activists before, so it was like whatever. And he asked if he could buy some posters. And I said, "Yeah, sure. What the heck?" And he was like, "Can I pay you in Bitcoin?" And I had no idea what Bitcoin was. And but it was a pretty small job anyways. It was like $100 to do the whole thing. So it was like, yeah, whatever. I'll take a risk and let him pay me in Bitcoin. And I didn't really understand anything about it at the time. And it sounded goofy. It just sounded like some goofy digital. Like I my first thought was actually that it was some kind of video game token or something. So that was fine. And then yeah, from there, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole. Like, okay, let's learn about this. Read the white paper. I remember watching videos from 2 guys, Roger Ver and Adam Kokesh, were 2 guys that were talking quite a bit about Bitcoin specifically, but a little bit. Adam was kind of into like he was kind of an altcoiner too. So
Right.
that was I remember he got really into Steam it, but I think that was a little bit later. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, that was
But
around 2016, I think.
yeah, it was a little later, but yeah, in 2012 and 2013, it was super, just like, drinking from the fire hose. And it was like, maybe I should be a miner. And me and some buddies got together. I've always had friends in IT, and I've always kind of worked in and out of IT and other things. And we wanted to build a a small mining operation. I never wanted to be like a Jihan Wu or anything, but I understood that the blockchain would grow and become too big to manage for a home node. But I always believed in using it as money and in paying lots of transactions, because that's what I was. So early in 2013, I immediately started like paying my employees and stuff. I was like, "Hey, let's, I'll buy some Bitcoin, whatever. You can use it as like the company can buy Bitcoin, it can pay our employees, and if vendors will take it too, like let's just turn this into an economy. Like I'll turn this into an economy myself." And but I realized that, okay, it's going to be difficult to run a home node over time, so we should plan ahead and build like a really good, efficient mining operation and build out an SPV wallet, or like mobile wallets essentially, that connect to it really directly and just keep the user experience really great while not making it necessary for people to download the whole chain to run the full node. So in my mind, that was my great idea. But the mining operation, we did build some of it out. We were up and going for a little bit, but our head engineer actually exit scammed on us and robbed me and my other partner. And so that was kind of a setback. That was early 2014. It was when the price ran up to like $1,000 for the first time. So he disappeared. And then at that point, I got involved in the scaling debates a little bit. I was always a big blocker. I was always interested in Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Unlimited. I always was a kind of a Mike Hearn, Jeff Garzik, Gavin Andreessen guy. And I've just been basically embroiled in the scaling wars ever since, which is about 5 years now. So,
Let me
yeah.
ask you this: what entices this on-chain uh,
Mhm.
expansion for you? Like, what is it that turns you away from off-chain solutions?
I guess to me, like like I said, I've worked in IT and technology. I also work in cybersecurity. Like I'm steeped in tech, so I feel like everything else in the world is already an off-chain technology. Like I can use Azure or AWS or all kinds of, I mean, I could spin up a payment solution that doesn't use blockchain. It's not that hard. You can make a spreadsheet that keeps track of things, and you could settle that on chain once a day or whatever if you wanted. But I just don't think that's as interesting. So it's kind of like you take the you take the more interesting problem to solve. Like I find Bitcoin fascinating as a protocol, like as an economic experiment and as a philosophical thing. And there's this game theory at the base layer that when you put something on top of it, or if you disconnect it, truly like something like Lightning, for example, is a separate ledger. Like it can be doing business outside of the ledger for X amount of time, but that allows you all kinds of different things. And it's just not Bitcoin. It's something else, at least in my opinion. So I like the idea of solving the problem with Bitcoin. I believe that Bitcoin is the solution to Bitcoin, in short.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this: if Bitcoin were to scale to the size of operations of, let's say, Visa, do
Mhm.
you think that those on-chain solutions would be adequate? Like, do you think that we could honestly raise a block size enough to be able to amount to that many transactions per second?
I do. So Visa, I think does about 60 million transactions at its absolute peak. So that would be the per second. So we're talking like Black Friday kind of traffic.
Right.
But typically, it's like between 2 and 5,000 transactions a second, which is not too bad. That's actually only like a 3 to 500 megabyte block based on Bitcoin protocol. So I understand why that sounds scary. It's 500 times the size of a current BTC block, but
Right.
in any other regard, when you think about 500 megabytes, I mean, what would you pay for a 500 megabyte, thumb drive or anything like 500 megabytes is the kind of thing, you could upload a 500 megabyte photo to social media in seconds. So, and I understand that a consensus network is going to be a little different. The big fear has always been propagation. So, can you propagate a block and have it settle without splitting the chain into multiple forks that
Right.
cause consensus problems? And I understand that, but we've had a long time to solve that problem, and that problem is actually solved if you're willing to solve it. I mean, even just simple parallelization. I think the UTXO model of Bitcoin makes it that you can process things in parallel and start building the next block while the current one is maybe not exactly settled. So there are things like that that I think are simple solutions that um, a lot of people just got away from because they didn't like the idea. But I mean, I think they're simple. And if you look at BSV, for example, which is the chain that I primarily advocate for, I mean, there's been a couple of 300 plus megabyte blocks just in the last 10 days. Um, if there's just a big uptick in traffic and boom, 360 megabyte block. And there was 8 minutes from the previous one and there was 9 minutes to the next block. So like it shows there wasn't some kind of propagation issue. It wasn't 23 minutes to build that block or whatever. It just kind of it happened very very easily, and it's just because the software has not been uh, beaten up, in my opinion. I don't like how BTC, the Bitcoin Core client, has added an exponential amount of code, like lines of code, but the efficiency of the network has maybe gotten worse. It actually depends how you measure it, but um, I don't know. I just don't find small blocks interesting.
Well, let me ask you this: if they were to raise the block size count to, let's say, 3 to 500 megabytes per second, how
Mhm.
does that condone a good working environment for the average consumer that wants to run a node at their home?
Um, See, I think that's an interesting. I don't know that that person actually exists. Like when I think of somebody who wants to run a node, like to me that sounds like you're essentially you're asking to participate in consensus, and you're asking to participate in the network, truly the governance model, but it's sort of like you're being like a commercial entity. You're like a producer, right? So I look at that, and it's sort of like somebody that like starts a business from home, and then your home is kind of this gray area, is like, well, is my home a business, or is this my home? Like, am I doing this personally? How do I file my taxes now? That kind of thing, you know?
Right.
So for me, I feel like a user who just wants to use Bitcoin really should use a light wallet, maybe even connected to the nodes you want. Like, there are ways to choose that. But if you're running a node, I feel like you should be treating yourself in a way that is profit seeking. Like, there should be value to your node that you're providing to the network, because it is a governance model. I mean, the entire white paper talks about nodes as part of governance. Like, it's a node's job to accept or reject blocks and that kind of thing. So it's a little more of a responsibility thing. So then asking the network as a whole to stay a certain way so that you can participate in governance is, it's, I think it's lazy. I've actually compared it to like, kind of a communist model. Like, it's sort of like joining a union to say like, hey, the world can't get so complicated that I can't participate. Like, I am this, maybe not bad, you know, not like a least common denominator in a bad way, but I'm only as capable as I am. But the network needs to stay small enough for me to participate as an individual. And I don't like that model, because I'm very much a capitalist. And
Right.
I think that's a, I think it's a good way to make sure the network never becomes anything more than a semi hobby project.
Hmm. That's a interesting way of looking at it, I suppose. I just think that these networks were designed to be as decentralized as possible. So the more nodes that you can onboard, the better, the safer the
Mm,
network becomes. And so the smaller the chain can be for the average consumer, the better in my eyes. But I can definitely see where you're coming from.
mhm.
Um, I think you're looking at it more from a hobbyist perspective, though, and I'm trying to look at it more from the average consumer perspective and like
Mm,
how to onboard as many people as possible.
sure. But do you think someone who runs a node is an average consumer? Like, I think of that at the very least as a kind of a prosumer, or somebody who is otherwise at least a little bit tech savvy to be a node operator.
Well, I think see that's what I think Bitcoin Core is trying to establish though. I think
Okay.
they're trying to make it as easy as possible to onboard the average consumer. Like I think eventually we're going to see nodes being able to run. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly Lightning Labs and Bitcoin
Mm,
Core has in store, but I could definitely see sharding maybe eventually coming on board to the Bitcoin blockchain,
mm,
which would allow people to run a lot smaller of a node than the entire blockchain of Bitcoin.
sure. Do you understand why I would it's funny because I hear this, and I just want to keep calling it like, I keep thinking of union members, and I don't want to be like, you know, the super hardcore like, Atlas Shrugged type necessarily, but I keep hearing exactly that. Like, this, the network needs to be easy enough for me, and I see that as sort of a like, we need to seize the means of production, you know, because that's a node's job, right? Is to produce blocks, or at least
Absolutely.
propagate them. So like, so you're taking the, like the industrialist, the commercial aspect of the network, and saying that that needs to be small enough for a simple person to participate in. And I think that that screws with the incentives, because like, I want the most valuable person, like the most efficient, the most creative and industrious person, to be able to outcompete, you know, my next door neighbor, for example, who I don't think should participate in Bitcoin governance, because I don't think that they have the capability. Like, they don't, I mean, they just don't, they're not even in the headspace to think that way. So I don't want the network to remain accessible for, again, not criticizing, but very simple people. I want the greatest people to be able to come up with um, ways that I can't think of. And a good example of that is, the creation of GPU mining or FPGA, and then moving to ASIC, and then improve how many generations of ASICs now. I think that's a good thing. I think that's capitalism at work. That's people saying, you know what, I can make more money if I create more efficiency, and more efficiency creates more security and value for the network as a whole. So I don't see that as a bad thing, because the king is not there for altruistic reasons, like he would be if the network stayed arbitrarily small. If it becomes more and more increasingly competitive, we get better and better competitors, and then we get the spillover benefits of that extremely competitive network as the user. I may not be capable of being a miner at this point, but I do get to benefit from really, really brilliant, hardworking, and competitive miners who will make me really kick-ass tools. So,
But look
uh,
at look at how far ASICs have come, though. Like, look
no,
at
sure,
how
it's incredible.
easy they are. Like, they're plug and play now at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So the average consumer could literally buy one off the shelf, plug it in, and all they
Sure.
would have to do is put their Bitcoin address in to
Mm-hmm.
receive their funds from the work that they put in.
Sure.
Um,
I
so
still I still don't see that as the average consumer. Like I think about the people in my neighborhood and how many of them are capable of doing Bitcoin, and I feel like it's almost none of them.
a,
Like they could do a wallet, like maybe understand how to make a transaction, but I don't see them.
a quick 3-minute video could teach anybody how to set up an ASIC, man, on YouTube. The onboarding is becoming real.
Sure, but I don't know. I feel like guys like me and you are pretty far on the spectrum of like, this is what's easy. Whereas if you're just not steeped in that space, it's terrifying.
Sure,
That's just my perception. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong.
I I think if so, my mom always calls me to ask about anything tech related that she
Mhm.
needs upgraded in her home or anything like that. But I think if I were to take 5 minutes out of my time to
Mhm.
explain to her how to set up a Bitcoin node, I think she would be
Mhm.
capable of doing something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, like this is we're talking about how many millions of people. So again, I think there's a spectrum there, but
That's
I
fair.
understand what you're saying. It certainly has gotten easier even over the last 3 to 5 years for,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I
Absolutely.
think that's fair.
I'm my hope is that in the coming years, people will be able to use their cell phones to be able to run full nodes, and it won't take up much of their CPU usage. Um, I think that the storage is going to be there eventually. Storage keeps getting more micro,
Mhm.
and yet much larger in space.
Sure.
So I I hope that in the next few years, people will be able to connect to whatever 5G network they have available to them and secure the blockchain that way.
I don't, well, so I also don't know, like, if you're not hashing, I don't think you're securing the network also. I think that's a little bit of that's a contentious point that I've had with small blockers for a long time. That when I see the, 10,000 quote unquote nodes on BTC, I see about maybe 65 of them that ever find a block. And then there's about 20 of them that find a block, within a 15 to 30 day window in a given month, right? So like most blocks are found by F2 pool and Ant pool and some of these other. So like I look at them and I say, okay, those are those are the nodes, right?
Right.
Whereas the other ones, I mean, some of them, in fact, lots of them are out of sync, or they're running software that actually does accept inflation bugs and those kind of things. And it's not an insignificant number. It's on some days the out of sync nodes is actually over 50%. And I think that is kind of indicative of what I'm saying, is that if you don't have like this financial like this profit seeking motive to run a node, that you're kind of you're gonna just ignore it, right? If I had a Raspberry Pi sitting in the corner of the room, I don't know how often I would check it if it wasn't making me money. So like I don't see the nodes on BTC as necessarily a big part of the security model. Um, except
Do they not uphold the blockchain standard? Do they not process the transactions that occur?
I think if they're not building blocks, I'm hesitant to even call them anything more than like a block explorer. And they are a block explorer. So I think there is some value to that, but I think that the most that they can contribute to the network is perhaps an alarm that something has gone wrong, but they can't really do anything to secure the network from attack. Like aside from hard fork, I suppose. But if they were to hard fork, that would be total chaos. So I don't know that that's actually a great option either.
And then, I mean, there's also many other types of blockchains now. Like
Sure.
you take a look at Tezos or Harmony, things that are proof of stake
Mm-hmm.
algorithms. Those obviously uh, require you just to run a wallet node
Sure.
um, to be able to uphold that blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
So the technology is definitely getting there.
Right.
So I would probably call Bitcoin a blockchain 1.0, and then Ethereum came along. I'd probably call that like a 2.0. And now we're seeing like blockchain 3.0s as like Tezos and Cardano, and I'm hesitant to even say Cardano because they don't even have a working product yet.
Yeah,
Um,
I like to rib on Cardano.
but Tezos actually does have a working product for
Sure.
us now, and I'm actually a big fan of the work that Tezos has done so far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the whole proof of stake algorithm that they chose, you can delegate, so it is a form of delegated proof of stake.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a working form of proof of stake because you have to have these validators that get voted into that space, and then you, if you're just the average person with not that many coins yourself, you can delegate those, and you still have access to them. They're still
Mm-hmm.
yours. You're just allowing somebody to create dividends for you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not a fan of proof of stake, mostly for philosophical reasons. I think
Sure,
technologically
sure,
it's fine. It's actually it's a I think it's a pretty obvious next step from a tech standpoint. If you um, don't wa- basically if you miss the boat on being able to compete in a proof of work model, then a proof of stake model actually makes sense for like, hey, I want to participate in consensus and security. But my criticisms of proof of stake are actually twofold. For one, I think the old world is proof of stake. So like a bank, for example, is proof of stake, right? Like we have the money and therefore we're going to allow the economy to work in a certain way because we control the money. So I think proof of stake is a lot like that, especially because whoever has the most stake would then be receiving the most of that dividend from their stake. So they continue to pull away from the rest of the crowd. Uh, and then my second criticism is I actually think it makes it a like you're being rendered dividends, which kind of makes it an investment. It makes it much more legally similar to an investment, which I think will cause legal problems,
sure.
and that'll invite all kinds of the problems that someone like me, if I'm sitting here with $10,000 worth of staked coins on a Raspberry Pi or something that I don't need FINRA or the FBI knocking on my door because I'm some kind of, you know, I don't even know, a money services business without a license, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that that's super likely, but I think it's more than plausible though. So especially at scale, I think the larger participants in a network like that will end up getting into some kind of trouble in the future for it, or it's at least a risk that I think a lot of people think is very unlikely, and I think it's more likely than people know.
I could definitely see that becoming a risk eventually.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like we're already starting to kind of see it with some of these. court cases. Like
Sure.
New York State alone, I'm sure you've read about some of their
Yeah.
court cases against even Tether. Like they're looking to audit Tether.
For sure.
So, and I completely agree with that audit, but
Well, and then to that, well, right, I do too. But to that, I'm also like, I think possibly the most important thing that Bitcoin gave us is like the solution to all of these problems, like consensus in an adversarial environment because of proof of work. Like proof of work is the most interesting thing about Bitcoin and blockchains in general, in my opinion. So proof of stake to me is sort of a like, it's like you're skipping the workout, but you want to be a competitor or something, it's like I want to be a professional baseball player, but I don't ever want to go to practice. So it's kind of
sure,
like,
sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I could definitely see that from a philosophical perspective.
Mm.
But from, like you said, from a technological perspective, proof of stake is definitely the way of the future as far as transactions per second. You can build so much on a protocol that's proof of stake,
Sure.
and it just makes it 10 times easier for devs to be able to build on top of that, especially whenever we're talking about protocols that allow smart contracts and
Sure.
you know these decentralized applications.
Right. Well, sure. Because you can have 1 second block times and all of that kind of stuff. So you don't ever have to worry about like long tail mempool issues
Right.
and that kind of thing. And I have a couple friends. I have a buddy actually who developed a number of different higher level softwares on top of EOS and TRX. And he's he
Oof.
talks about it. He talks about it all the time. Yeah, he's just like, oh man, it's such a cool system to build on from a technological standpoint because I don't ever have to worry about
Right.
losing my transaction. Like it's the constant instant settlement makes it that I can just kind of do anything. But the reason he builds on BSV today. The reason he switched, and he said it's a pain in the ass that he has this 10-minute block time that he has to grapple with.
Right.
But he can't stand all of the governance issues that occur in EOS and TRX because he's like, I've just always got some king that I'm dealing with, or
Right.
this group of kings that are like, it's a different blockchain now, kind of what we've seen with like Steemit and Hive and all of that. It's like,
Oh, dude.
one guy controlled too many coins and now here, this massive governance change because, Justin slammed his hand on the desk. So
Dude, that's a completely different conversation, man. That we could definitely go down that rabbit hole, but that's yeah.
But I think that's something like that's the thing that proof of work solves, though. Like in Bitcoin, like you can't be a Justin Sun. Like
Right.
we even saw like probably the closest proxy to that would be Jihan Wu, and he was the king for 2 years ish. But I think after 2017, I mean, we saw Bitmain go through a couple of rounds of bankruptcy, and maybe there's one CEO and a different CEO and all this stuff, and in the meantime, we saw the growth of places like Via BTC and F2 Pool. I think is finding more blocks than anybody now on any version of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so, we see that in a proof of work model, if you can be the king for a day, but if you're not planning for tomorrow, you're not going to be the king tomorrow. So I like the honesty that creates in the governance and the security of the chain. And I don't think there's a way to do that in a DPoS or a proof of stake model. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I just think the incentives are too easy to game, and people are too tempted to just print money out of nowhere. I mean, we've seen Justin do exactly that, and that's so.
On the Tezos blockchain, anybody with over 8,000 coins can vote on any updates to the blockchain. And I think so it's a self-amending blockchain, which is what I find incredibly fascinating. The users actually vote on all of these upgrades that are brought up to the users. Like the devs will, give these new protocols to the users and say, hey, do you want this? Do you not want this? And then a vote is taken. And so that's what I find fascinating about Tezos. It honestly reminds me the most of Bitcoin in a proof of stake algorithm, because with Bitcoin, if you're running a node, if you're running a node that is hashing, I should probably specify that.
Yeah.
You have a vote, basically.
Sure.
That your work, your proof of work that you're contributing to the blockchain is your vote. Whereas on Tezos, there's an actual vote that is taken for protocol upgrades.
Interesting.
Um,
Is it similar? Is there like a treasury or a DAO or anything like that on Tezos? I'm not super familiar with their setup.
So there is a foundation. There is a Tezos Foundation, and that makes up the contributions of the ICO that that took place, and then it also includes the development team. So anything that the Tezos Foundation wants to put that ICO money towards, like research and development or advertising or marketing, anything like that will come from those funds. But any upgrades to the protocol itself are voted on by the users of the blockchain.
Okay. Interesting. That's are you familiar with Dash and Decred and some of those other projects that have tried similar like secondary governance models like that?
Yeah. The problem with Dash is that they had this huge pre-mine, and I don't think they'll ever get away from that. Like you'll
certainly a criticism that nobody will let go.
No, I don't blame people. That's
right. Yeah, I don't either.
That's a very fair argument.
Mm-hmm. I think my concern, like when it comes to voting like that, and when there is a dev reward, I've done some research into it because it was a big conversation in Bitcoin Cash over the last I think just the last 6 months, but it actually came up in 2018 as well. That the lead developers of Bitcoin Cash, the guys from Bitcoin ABC, so primarily Amaury Sachet
and XT,
was XT as well.
Yeah,
wanted to do a dev tax.
Oh,
I don't recall that.
I don't know about that, but XT is the same camp as Cash, pretty much.
Oh, sure. Yeah, XT. I think there probably are like 3 nodes or something left that run XT and are on Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
But it's a dead project. There's nobody maintaining XT or anything anymore.
For sure. And let me ask you this: Do you think Cash will follow that suit?
It's like essentially not being developed anymore.
Right.
Possibly. I think long term, I think Bitcoin Cash is going to die. I think they've split the difference in the wrong way on way too many things.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
They're not a small block blockchain, but they're also not really a big block blockchain. Like they've really married this 32 megabyte block as being perfect, which I look at it sort of the same as Bitcoin Core. Like 32 megabytes is still really arbitrarily small in the grand scheme of things. So I'm not interested. I also kind of think they have like a really toxic developer community as well.
Absolutely.
But so I've done some research into over the last 6 months, they've been arguing about whether or not a portion of the block reward should go into a foundation that then pays the developers and blah, blah, blah. And I think, first of all, it didn't happen on the last upgrade, but I think that if it did, and on some of the blockchains that do, I'm concerned that there's going to be like racketeering charges at some point, because like you're sort of creating what's called an unlimited liability corporation, which is, and it's like an LLC, except you didn't insulate yourself in any way with like the legal protections. So it's kind of how the mafia runs. Like it's like a de facto government, but you're not registered and you're not paying taxes and you're not doing, like, you're not really running a business, but you've by de facto run a business, and there's problems with that. So I'd be concerned about if Tezos is running the way that it sounds like it's running, that if devs are being paid like specifically out of the reward, that they could potentially get themselves into racketeering trouble.
They're not being paid out of rewards from the blockchain itself. They're being paid from that ICO fund, I believe.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're being paid from the ICO fund that was taken back in 2017.
Right. Sounds right. I'm also not a fan of ICOs. I think ICOs. I actually. So I like the idea, but I think the way that they've been done, like I think, again, it's technically an illegal fundraiser. And while I like the idea, doing it, when 98% of them or something have ended up being exit scams, I think again it invites like that FBI knock on the door that
Absolutely. Oh,
that
and dude, like people that have been in this space long enough, like you and I, we've seen some shit, and so
yeah.
like we're very skeptical about any of those things. Like
Mhm.
I am extremely careful with where I put my money now. Like
For sure.
I had money in Mount Gox and in Cryptsy that
Yeah.
I'll never see again.
You're right.
But um, like with ICOs, I was very skeptical about those,
Mhm.
but there are people that I find incredibly fascinating in this space, and one of those persons that I find really amazing is Tim Draper.
Mhm.
He was, an early Bitcoin adopter as far as capitalists go. He saw
Sure.
the potential and he endorsed Tezos and invested quite a bit into the
Mm.
Tezos Foundation. And so whenever I heard about that, that's whenever I came on board with the idea of Tezos. Um,
Interesting.
Anybody that is that wealthy, that puts a valuation of a protocol like this and like puts their label on it,
Mhm.
I'm probably in favor of.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting when you see somebody uh, in that position because obviously he knows his opinion is going to move markets.
Right.
So I do think it's interesting when people like him do that, or when you see the news about J.P. Morgan has a new blockchain research team or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, interesting.
And it's built on the Ethereum Enterprise
Right.
Alliance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Hmm.
That
Weird bedfellows.
Yep, that's another thing. Like, do I have some Ethereum for whenever staking becomes available?
Hmm.
Sure I do. But am I happy with the fact that they're getting into bed with bankers? The
Yeah.
reason that we made blockchains in the first place? Not really. No.
Yeah. It's weird, and I have mixed feelings about it too. Like uh, I think I mentioned Mike Hearn a little earlier when I was introducing like
Yep.
who my main influences are, and like I mean he's been out of Bitcoin since like 2016 at this point, but
Yeah. No.
he
That was earlier than 2016, I think. I think he left in 2014 or 15 cuz I remember reading
yeah.
his blog post about
Hmm.
why he's quitting Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And whenever I read that, I had to dig pretty deep into my own like into my own soul. Like I had to
Yeah.
like decide, is this really worth it? Like
Right.
if somebody that has been in this space this long and
Hmm.
can't seem to find it uh,
Right.
valuable to them anymore, is it really that valuable?
Right.
And obviously like it has been valuable
Oh,
throughout this,
sure. Yeah.
but
He certainly would have made more fiat currency had he stuck it out.
right.
But I think the reason I bring him up is he's very much he was a monetary activist. He was a libertarian and things, but
Right.
um it's funny because he's still on the fringes. Like you can still get comments out of him too. He hasn't like completely like blocked all Bitcoiners from reality or anything like that. But he was very keen on talking about the value of not putting yourself in a dangerous position. Like if you're going to do gray market stuff, like don't do it in the parking lot of the police department, right?
Yeah.
And that was always like it always kind of got him in trouble with like the typical crypto anarchist community who's like, no man, we need to be these agorist activists. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it really makes a lot more sense to like get Bitcoin to be used as a business tool, and then like maybe we don't get like this complete anarchist utopia, but we do get inflation proof sound money for the world, which is a big step forward. So he
Right.
was like this very reasonable thinker, and I think that's why he quit. Actually, is I think there's so much like just toxic bickering that happens in the Bitcoin space. But he's kind of my Mike Hearn was very much my soul animal. So
Okay.
yeah, but he's mostly, so first of all, he's a big blocker. He always
Right.
was. He
Right.
was, I believe he was the guy who coded up Bitcoin
He
XT.
did. Yep.
And then I mean, God, he get mercilessly attacked for it too. I mean, he had his entire ISP was DDoSed for like his whole county and things because he had these XT nodes and all this stuff. And he's just like, man, like good grief. Am I the most dangerous man in Bitcoin? Like I literally just wanted, I think it was only a 2 megabyte uh, upgrade too. Like it literally just made it to 2 megabytes. And he's like, we're testing, guys. And he just got mercilessly beaten out of the community. So
Yeah,
uh,
I definitely. So I am a Bitcoin maximalist. Like I will admit to that, but um, I can see. I mean, I'm not blind. I can see that people introduce upgrades that are profitable for themselves.
mm,
But honestly, I think that's one of the things that draws a lot of investors or a lot of anarcho-capitalists to blockchain technology is the fact that
mm,
it is a very capitalistic society that
sure.
we are in the blockchain space.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to do though what is profitable for them in this space, and I've noticed that throughout this time, nobody is very altruistic when it comes
No.
to crypto. So I mean, that's something that we're going to have to live with. But that kind of leads me into a question that I wanted to ask you. Is consensus important in voting for upgrades or only at the protocol level? Because um, you and I had a conversation about consensus the other day, and
Mm,
you brought up the protocol format of consensus.
mm,
And whenever I was mentioning consensus, I was actually talking about the root of the word consensus,
okay.
being able to come to an agreement in a group. So, uh, do you believe that consensus is important for upgrades, or is it only important at the protocol level?
Um, well, I think the way that when we had the conversation the other day, when I hear consensus, I actually am thinking about upgrades to the protocol. So
Okay.
I guess kind of combining the both parts of the question. I think typical consensus. This is like every business transaction is consensus, right? That I
Right.
would I
Right.
would rather have this this steak rather than my $12 or whatever at the grocery store. So that's a consensus right there. That's a choice that I've made to upgrade what's in my wallet to steak instead of cash.
Right.
But when it comes to the protocol, like I get I get real deep into the meanings of words. So it comes down to like how is consensus achieved in Bitcoin, and is there a difference between a consensus rule and a Bitcoin rule as far as it's implemented in the Bitcoin system? And that's this is like college philosophy kind of conversation, I guess, if you're going to really dig into it. But yeah, consensus on an upgrade, sure. If somebody wants to make the op return larger and it doesn't break the consensus of the network or something, like, yeah, that's fine. And that's the nature of a soft fork, right?
Right.
So I think soft forks are a little bit insidious because uh, it allows a bunch of guys who are capable of pushing software to upgrade the network in a way that doesn't require active participation in the conversation. Like if you're just the kind of guy that upgrades your software when a new version gets pushed, and you're not capable of verifying signatures and auditing code yourself, I think you're going to be more likely to just be like, oh, there's a new version of Bitcoin Core. I will download it and move forward because I trust the core developers or whatever.
Do you
Uh,
think that's what's happened?
I think in many regards, yes. I think even if you just look at the way that the network is laid out, there are so many nodes that are out of sync on a regular basis, and like they're just not really being monitored. Like they will accept updates, um, but I think there's a lot of people that are not technical enough to be participating in that who are, and I think it's a detriment to the network. Like they're adding endpoints to the network that are not adding value back to the network, and I think that's the problem. So when it comes to consensus, I really think it needs to be, I mean, let's even just take like a Republican governance model, right? Like why do we elect senators? It's because we want somebody to be a professional to go through all of these choices and make an educated decision based on their ability to do it. And I know governments are super corrupt and they may not do it well, but in theory, that's how it's supposed to work, right?
So
So
would you compare Bitcoin's governance model to an active government?
I would actually, yeah. I think that if you look at the white paper and look at how it was first implemented in the original code, is that it acts very much like, you know, maybe the Declaration of Independence
Sure.
as a statement of what we're here to accomplish, and then you can look at the first implementation of the U.S. government, which was actually a confederacy.
Right.
So we can take that, the post-Revolutionary War United States and say, okay, they fought this war based on the Declaration, and then this is what they created after. And was that a good thing? And what can we glean from that? And I think that's a very conservative way to look at both governance and Bitcoin. And that is the way that I would take a look at Bitcoin and say, okay, um, are we removing other value by doing these things that are not considering why the protocol was implemented that way initially? And I think the history of Bitcoin Core is very much a history of that. I mean, we've seen the entire script stack essentially just shut off because the core developers, specifically Peter Todd and Greg Maxwell, looked at it and they're like, "Ah, man, malleable transactions allows all these different things that we don't like, and we're just going to shut them off." And actually, even Gavin Andreessen did that. Gavin Andreessen pushed probably the most used soft fork is pay to script hash. Commonly, people see it P2SH, which is any wallet that starts with a 3 is typically used for multi-sig, but it can be used for other things. Is a pay to script hash soft fork. And Gavin pushed it because he looked at all these different scripts and he's like, man, I just don't know if I'm going to break the network or not if I try to implement multi-sig using the existing stack. So I'm going to shut off a big chunk of the stack and I'm just going to create this soft fork that solves my own problem. And I think that that's a big detriment.
Now, with consensus, though, um, obviously there are going to be those node operators that don't know how to code and they don't know exactly what they're looking for. But I would
Mm.
say the majority of pools that are mining Bitcoin know exactly what they're looking for. And so if they come to consensus and decide that the protocol is to be upgraded in a certain way that
Mm.
aligns with Bitcoin Core, um, would you say that they're all wrong, or
No, I think the pools. I would have very different criticisms of the pools. The guys that are
sure,
actually building blocks. First of all, it's funny when people talk about like, well, BTC has 98% of the hash power for a reason, and blah blah blah. But you actually look at those pool operators. So if you break it down to the like 30 people that run the major mining pools, uh, almost all of them are also mining the big block forks. Like they're mining either Bitcoin Cash or BSV as well.
sure.
And many of them are mining all three. So
Well, they're going to do what's ever profitable for them.
yeah, I think that's part of it. But I mean, there's not so much profit there that it kind of doesn't make sense to do it at all unless you're sort of doing it as like you're hedging your bets, or you're at least interested in the experiment, right?
Well,
And
but you can see the hash power change as
mhm.
profitability
Oh, for sure.
becomes like more profitable for
Hmm.
certain protocols.
For sure. Yeah, and we saw that right after the BTC halvening that
Right.
I think BSV was like 57% more profitable to mine for about 24 hours.
Right,
so,
right,
so
right.
yeah, like, and they had a huge update, like their hash power tripled or something. So like there is obviously that there are the opportunistic miners that just want the block rewards, and then as soon as it balances out, they'll just switch to whatever else. So that's a different kind of thing too. But like I look at these. First of all, I know a number of these miners. I have relationships with a handful of them,
Cool.
and they're very much. Um, it's funny. I think there's a big east-west split because the developers are typically American and European, and the miners are typically Chinese.
Right.
So there's a lot of confusion as to what their relationship is, just based on sort of cultural differences, like the way that Americans and Europeans think about like a sort of a business relationship is very different than Chinese do.
Absolutely.
So they look at it, and I think they didn't really understand what the whole scaling war was about, like SegWit 2x, and I think they just sort of assumed that, like, hey, we shook hands at the New York agreement, and then something changed, and we don't know what that was, but they screwed us. But also, like, it's more profitable to stay on BTC right now, but also, like, we're going to keep mining the other fork because that's what we agreed upon. So, like,
Hmm.
so I know that that's the case for a handful of people.
I
uh,
don't I don't know if I would take it that far, because by saying that, you're basically saying like that the Chinese miners that are upholding our current ledger for BTC are
mhm.
incompetent. Um, and
not
I
in not incompetent. It's, I don't want to say they don't understand in, like, in a way that's like they're ignorant, because that's not the case. It's more the way their worldview is sort of like, we made a handshake deal, and the handshake deal looked like the big blockchain.
yeah,
And so when the fact that the small blockchain, that there was sort of a renege on SegWit 2x and all of that stuff, I kind of think they they don't understand why, like, why it was reneged upon. Like, they don't understand what the disconnect was as to why they were screwed.
yeah,
Because I mean, every miner I know is pro big block, like long term. They look at it and they're like, it just doesn't make any sense. There's not going to be any money for us
yeah,
on BTC as the block rewards keep going down. And, like, they don't understand. They don't understand the thinking, but they're so respectful of the Western developers because they know that they're software savvy. And they look at it and they're like, we need them to teach us why they have done it this way. And it's just a disconnect. I don't think they understand the double cross the way that Westerners do, basically.
yeah. I I definitely agree that there's like a customs disparity there, but I definitely think that they understand what's going on. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the fact that they're kind of in the dark on these sort of issues, um, but I could see that. With all this being said, the different hard forks that we've experienced throughout Bitcoin's history. Um, why do you think that we have become so divided, and like why have we started this tribalistic uh, society, like where we each have our own different groups that agree on different upgrades, but okay, we don't agree with this group, so let's just make our own new chain. Where do you think that we went wrong?
I think some of it's just human nature. I mean, that's just business, right? Um, that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is the fact that there was a big disconnect in what people thought Bitcoin was for. So you get the people who are entrepreneurs, and they look at it and say, oh, this is an international business tool. I can do remittance with my clients that are on another continent,
Sure.
and that's great. But then you get the people who look at it as, well, I'm a software developer. and there's an opportunity for me to make money as a software developer building software and whatever. And then you get the people who are, well, I'm primarily an investor. You get the Tim Drapers or the Mike Novogratzes and those guys, and they're like, oh, okay, well, it's a scarce asset and demand will go up because it will. And if I buy early, I get richer. And those are all very different worldviews for the utility of a given asset. So
Sure.
and I think that's my primary aversion. Like the thing that I typically will argue with people about as a big blocker, I believe that Bitcoin is best um, when it can be transacted very, very simply and be used as a business tool. And so I like the idea of Bitcoin having, terabyte blocks. Why not? I kind of don't care about the small node operator if the benefit is that I get to do, maybe I've got a business that is making profit on 50,000 transactions a day on BSV because it's connected to social media or incentivizing a botnet that does all kinds of, IP monitoring and all kinds of different stuff. Like Bitcoin can do all kinds of cool things like that.
So that peer-to-peer cash.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But then you got the people who are like, no, like I want to be able to run my Raspberry Pi and have my node and be able to spin up a Lightning node and transact trustlessly and and that's just how they want to be about it. And when we're all sort of fighting over the same tool, like we kind of can't have both unless again we split the chain, right? So
Yeah.
I do get to have BSV and somebody else does get to have BTC. But then it becomes this debate because now there's this liquidity problem and there's this brand confusion and
Absolutely.
there's all these things where it kind of turns into like an Israel Palestine thing where it's like, well, my people were here first. It's, well, what do you mean my people were actually here first? And then it gets to like, we're going over 10,000 years of history.
Yeah.
And who screwed who? And it's like, well, you've both massacred each other about 50 times over the last 10,000 years and you've kicked each other out. And first of all, there is no innocent party. And and at some point you either have to shake hands and be okay, or somebody needs to quit and leave. And otherwise it's just going to continue to be a war because your worldviews are they're incompatible. And so I don't know how it shakes out long term, but that's definitely why there is this toxic tribalism. And then the thing that makes it that much worse is that people are invested in it, and it's typically unsophisticated investors. So
Sure.
it's 20-year-olds or maybe 60-year-olds or whatever who are told that if you buy this thing, you'll be rich in 5 years or 10 years. And if you're not, then you feel lied to. And then you look into it and you're like, well, it was Roger Ver's fault, and then it turns into whatever else, So
I won't lie to you. That was me initially. I thought
mhm,
that it was magic internet money that would make me rich one day,
sure.
initially. And that was before I really started to dive into exactly what it was and kind of comprehend exactly what Satoshi was trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
But I had always been a capitalist. I had always been more libertarian leaning. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of this community is either libertarian or anarcho capitalist. But it kind of fell right in line with that libertarian thinking, I think. And so over time, I definitely started to study what the technology was itself and became acquainted with the ins and outs of blockchain technology as a whole. But I think that the people that come on board that are just those, uninformed, uneducated investors that are just trying to make money, they have the potential to eventually learn what it is. So if we can onboard them initially and then teach them, which is exactly what I'm trying to do with my channel, by the way,
For sure.
um, then we have that opportunity there to make more people believe in this technology as a whole. So I can definitely see, and I agree a lot of with what you're saying as far as like that tribalism, like where it came from.
Mhm.
There are different worldviews out there, But this is going to be my last question. I know we're like right at that hour mark now.
Sure.
So, do you think that the tribalism that we see in today's, blockchain world goes hand in hand with shilling? Like, do you believe that maybe the more stake you have in that specific blockchain, the more you're going to be tribalistic towards that? Do you think it coincides directly with the net worth that you have in that specific asset?
I think it can. I don't know if I'm special. I doubt that I'm special, but I've I've always tried to really separate watching my portfolio number shift up and down from the real reasons why I'm here, which
Right.
first were philosophical. Actually, first it was some guy just paid me, so it was first video game tokens. Like, what are these actually worth? And then from there, it was like learning about like, oh, like this is digital sound money. Like, this is awesome. So then it became very philosophical for me, and it was really important to me early to figure out like, okay, what is the purpose of this? Like, who engineered this and why, and what should it look like at scale per what the architect built? And I would do the same thing with like a building. Like, if I was given blueprints, then like I should be able to know like, what will this building look like when it's done. So that's what always mattered to me. But the thing that mattered most to most of the people that I've ever talked to about it is the pumpamentals. Essentially, it's the how is this going to make me rich? So in
Right.
2017 at Thanksgiving dinner, when I've got my 65-year-old aunt asking me if she should buy Bitcoin, I'm sitting there sitting there saying like, well, you probably shouldn't. No. So,
Yeah.
and here's why. And it's kind of a, this thing where it's like, on the one hand, I've been wanting my family to ask me about Bitcoin for 5 years at that point.
Right.
And I want to shill her the Bitcoin, everything, the whole revolution, but it's like, first of all, that's not what she wants to hear. She doesn't care. She wants to hear, is it going to, make her retirement easier? So when she's 75, is she going to be able to buy a yacht instead of, whatever, moving into a junky retirement home or something?
Right.
And, so it's a very weird thing, this notion of shilling people. So I've actually defaulted, and I know you've been part of my social media community for some time, and I hope that this is obvious, but every time people ask about like, should I buy this thing? Is this a good investment? Should I hold this thing right now? I always respond with a question, and I always ask, um, how has it changed since you bought it? So why should it be more valuable in the future than it was when you bought it? So can you explain that to me? And if you can, then maybe you are a sophisticated investor, or at the very least, I'm trying to help them become a more sophisticated thinker about why they invested in the first place. And then the other reason is I want people to actually build things. Like, I had a conversation in a Litecoin page earlier today, where some guy was like, "Man, I've been holding Litecoin for like 3 years, and I am still just losing money."
Yeah.
And I just responded to him and said, like, "Can I ask how you have even attempted to add value to Litecoin rather than assuming Litecoin is just going to give value to you?" And the initial response, I get the like, this guy's just like, he just hates Litecoin. And I'm like, well, nothing about my question implied anything negative about Litecoin.
Right.
I'm asking like, maybe you should start a business that utilizes the Litecoin blockchain in such a way that creates demand, because that demand will make Litecoin more valuable and will make you more wealthy.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do any work to make Litecoin more valuable? And the response from the 20 people that responded was, first of all, no, and second of all, get out of our group. You're a troll. And so God. So when I see that, I think that some communities are going to innately be full of trolls and shills forever,
Right.
because um Litecoin is a redundant, problematic blockchain, in my opinion. Like it's too similar to BTC in all the ways that matter, and everything that makes it superlative to BTC is only very slight.
I
And
mean,
so,
doesn't Charlie though call Litecoin like the testing ground for
yes,
Bitcoin?
it's the test net. He hasn't contributed any code to Litecoin in like 2.5 years. He does, however, contribute a little bit of code to BTC. Um, but he sees it as like, well, yeah, I tested Litecoin, but he speaks out of both sides of his mouth on it. I actually think he's a giant snake. But well, because on the one hand, it was, yeah, Litecoin is for payments, like pay with Litecoin, and he's going to UFC events and buying nachos with his Litecoin and stuff like that, and and acting like it's some part of the revolution and whatever. People are going to buy stuff with Litecoin, but then, like you said, at the same time, he's like, Litecoin's just a test net for Bitcoin.
Right.
And it's like, well, those two things are not, like, they can't possibly be the same. So, on one of those things, you are lying, Charlie.
Yeah.
And then it creates this toxicity of people who, I can't imagine having bought Litecoin 3 years ago and still be down on my money after everybody telling me, that cryptocurrency just, makes you rich AF. And
Well, I think 3 years ago, that would have been around the time where they were introducing that huge, pumped up partnership with the payment solution.
Well, there was
That
going to be light pay and credit cards and
and
all
it
kinds
fell
of stuff.
through, and it fell through. So that's probably right whenever they bought, and they just assumed like that there was going to be something coming up
Right.
next. But
Yeah.
one thing that they do have going for them, aren't they adding anonymity soon to their blockchain?
Allegedly, and they've been talking about this for about a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some Mimblewimble upgrade to Litecoin, but
Is it ZK Snarks?
no, Mimblewimble is a unique newer technology.
Oh, okay.
It is an anonymity or anonymity. I always screw that up. Anonymity upgrade. But it's completely new.
Okay.
Well, it's not that new, but it's newer than ZK Snarks.
Okay.
So, but it's developed by Andy Polstra, who's one of the main dudes at Blockstream, and he pushed out the Mimblewimble white paper maybe 2 years ago now, and the main implementation of it is on the coin called Grin, and there's a couple other smaller ones. There's gosh, I don't even remember them now. They're all super small cap
I'll have to
coins.
look into that.
It's interesting. I actually read kind of recently that the anonymity set was not nearly as powerful as they thought it was.
Really.
Yeah, that I think I don't know that somebody cracked it, but somebody beat it up pretty good and was like, this isn't even as good as whatever. I still think ZK Snarks is fundamentally the most interesting anonymity
Oh,
technology.
for sure, for sure.
I think Monero is brilliant. Like the entire protocol of it is brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't, again, my issues with Monero are that I think it will always be so illegal that it will never actually have a big amount of value. But Monero is a very interesting project, no less.
That
But
one uses CryptoNote, correct?
it did. I don't think it uses crypto node at all anymore. They've gone through so many hard forks and upgrades. And I'm a little bit behind on them. I used to be a Monero miner for a good amount of time. So
Okay.
it was kind of my big altcoin foray was like, yeah, I'll be a Monero guy. And then
Yeah.
it
That's never been in my portfolio.
interesting.
I mean, I see its use case. I definitely think that there should be anonymous cryptos out there,
Right.
for people that want to use the internet the way that it was designed. But that's just never been me. I don't really care. I'm not searching for anything online that anybody cares about. So
sure. And that's for me, like, very short segue here. I decided that much more than anonymity and the potential for crime, that the more important thing was to give the world sound money. And
sure.
so it was much more like, you know what, if I fight for Monero, I'm just going to get myself in trouble. Like I'm going to be
Right.
connected in some way to like some human trafficker or something, which is completely not what I was up to.
Right.
But they're just like, if I'm effective as a Monero advocate, I'm just going to end up in prison probably. So
Yeah.
I just realized like, it's just not the way to go. Then I also disagreed with a bunch of their roadmap items too, as a miner, and they hard forked me off the network. So I was like, you know what, I'm done. But,
Yeah.
so that was me saying goodbye to Monero, and it was around the time that Bitcoin Cash was hard forking and all of that. So I was much more interested in
Oh,
that
for
conceptually.
sure.
So
For sure.
yeah,
That was a rough time.
yeah, yeah, it sure was. So, but yeah, so now I actually consider myself more than anything, I'm like a Bitcoin protocol maximalist. So like, I think the closest we can get to pure Bitcoin is the best thing. And for me right now, that is BSV. It's just an experiment in, let's re-implement what Satoshi created,
So
where it goes.
if that project were to go to zero tomorrow,
Mm.
would you go back to Bitcoin as it is now, or would you move to something else?
I would probably just quit, honestly. Like
Okay.
I I'm so uninterested in small block Bitcoin. Uh, it's all. I mean, being a 2012er, like the earning money aspect of it, I'm over it. Like I did very well. 2017 functionally retired me.
Right.
Um, that was fine. I don't need Bitcoin to do anything else for me in that regard. What interests me is all of the business models that can be created with peer-to-peer transactions. I only believe in proof of work, so that eliminates all the like cool stuff that might happen on like EOS or anywhere else, and all of that. Like so if BSV goes away, like I've got so much bad blood now also with like the BTC and the BCH people that like
Sure.
they wouldn't have me back anyways.
I would accept you back, man.
I appreciate that. But
you seem like a civilized human being that is adequate at having a conversation like in a civilized manner.
I
So
do my best.
yeah.
So, but yeah, honestly, like I think my philosophical leanings have become so sharp and specific that I don't know. I would probably get bored anyways. Like if I were to just like semi-retire from Bitcoin stuff for a while, I'd probably slink back a couple of years later if I just was, had a new thought on my mind about it and wanted to share it or something.
For
But
sure.
yeah.
I know like after 2017, like I went through like a mild depression because I had my channel going, and I was very bullish at the time, and I
Yeah.
think it was kind of misplaced. And like I didn't see the writing on the wall at the time, although it should have been obvious to a lot of people. But there was obviously like a lot of manipulation going on back then with the market itself.
For sure. Tons of it.
And you can definitely like, I want to say like whenever things like that happen, you grow from that, and hopefully like I'd be ready for something like that next time. But with my channel, I was telling people, how bullish I was, and I kind of felt like a fraud afterwards. So
Hard.
I kind of like sunk down for a couple of years, and I'm just now getting my channel started back up. So
Interesting.
It's taken me a little while to come out of that, kind of slumber. I kind of felt like I was in a haze, but I think the market itself is moving in the right direction now. However, there's some things that I would personally change, but that's for a different time.
Sure.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been a great conversation, and I like hearing different people's perspectives on these issues, because we're all a part of the same network when it boils down to it. Like we all came in here from wanting different things, but we all got here. So Um, I appreciate it, man.
For sure. No, I'm happy to be on. I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad we got to talk. Actually, like, anytime I have like text based debates with people, I'm always like, man, I don't ever want to come across as somebody who's like dismissive
For sure.
or unpleasant, because like, I can't remember if we said this off the air or if it was recorded, but like, I like people, and
Right.
Bitcoin to me is a vehicle for cooperation with people.
Right.
If I can transact with you as easily as I can transact with somebody who's in like rural Thailand or anywhere else, like our world becomes much smaller, and we can see the humanity in people that, we might disagree on a whole bunch of things. We might be different political stands, or we might have completely, separate religious beliefs and do all kinds of things that are very different. But if we can start to just sort of do things together and start to see what we do have in common, we can all be better for it. So I'm really grateful, first of all, for the invitation, and I'm glad that we got to talk, because having this conversation, like, I think we have a lot more in common than we do as adversaries. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad we got to talk.
Me too.